a subscriber to our YouTube channel, then certainly you'll have gotten a notification that we are now live. We're about a minute or so late, but we're still on schedule for being round about the top of the hour. Welcome to Talkin Con, a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego. Yes, I got a notification this week. It's an Englishman in San Diego's birthday, which kind of freaked me out. 2013 is when I kind of launched the whole proceedings, certainly as the Google Plus page, to do a couple of interviews with the likes of CCI head staff and a couple of players in the con culture game, and also just to kind of do what I do as my road to San Diego. But as that grew and developed, the website kicked in, the convention collective kind of span off from that, the coverage of various cons has developed, and I've been blessed with the support that I've had, and also the shows I've been able to cover, and also been able to panel host as well. I mean, there's been a number of highlights over the course of the last certainly 3-4 years with the likes of Chris Claremont and Frank Miller and John Romita Jr. And having to be on stage with these heroes of mine has just been an absolute joy. We are going to be doing some giveaways over the course of the next hour or so. So if you are a fan, certainly of Jim Lee, of Frank Quitely, and also of Matt Ferguson, some stuff to give away throughout the course of the show. Now, we are live on YouTube, on Facebook, on Periscope, Twitter, and also on Twitch. If you are watching on any of those platforms, we did actually have a bit of issue last week on certainly the Periscope feed with one or two people, or was certainly one person giving us a little bit of a trolling. If possible, we're looking for kind of moderators, as it were, to kind of keep an eye on the feed, to keep an eye on what's actually being said on the comments. So please do keep an eye on them, report them as need be, block them as required, and we would love to just keep things nice and clean and going in a nice orderly fashion. So please do keep an eye on the comments. I mean, certainly on the Facebook and on the Periscope ones, we should be able to see them inside our broadcast window. But just in case, if you could just keep an eye on things. We've got Dan Berry, who's watching from the San Diego Film Fest. So hopefully you're having a good time, Dan. I know that it's been a very busy weekend with plenty of films. Leanne D's watching as well. Hopefully she's fine. But yeah, lots of things to get into today. So thank you very much indeed for joining us as we get into today's show. One or two people have been asking if we are going to be covering Walker Stalker Con. We're going to touch on it at the end in the news section, but as it is an ongoing convention, as I'm waiting on a reply from James Fraser, we're not going to get too much into it, but we're certainly going to touch into one or two verified bits and pieces that have happened over the course of the weekend. So bear with us. We are going to get into some of that as well. The Facebook transmission is now live, so please do share that if you can. Share the various social media feeds. Do let everyone know that we are broadcasting today, and please do let us know what's going on. Right. Hello there. Welcome along to Talkin Con, a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego. My name's Leonard Sultana, and each and every week we talk comic conventions, con culture, and all the stuff and nonsense that goes on around it. As always, we are very grateful for your support, so please do jump on Patreon. After this particular broadcast, we'll do ourselves our after show. We kind of skipped last week because I was in the Lakes International Comic Art Festival and I was falling asleep. I think people will recognize that I was definitely kind of drifting. I had been awake for 38 hours. I think I had an excuse. So yes, it had definitely been a long weekend, but it was good. Michael P's watching. Dan Berry, like I say, has been at the San Diego Film Fest. We're going to be trying to get some of the bits and pieces from that up on the Convention Collective. He went to see The Irishman. Apparently not too positive with him and the other two people that represented the Con Collective in that particular audience. So, but we'll see, find out more about that when the review is posted next week. But yeah, looking forward to it. As always, we have ourselves the chats open on many platforms, on Facebook, on Twitch, on Periscope, and also on YouTube. The comments are coming through, so please do jump in. Let everyone know that you're watching. Let us know where you're watching from as well and what you're getting up to today. Perhaps you are at a convention. Do let us know if you're at a show this weekend, and we'll do our best to kind of say hello to everybody. Aaron Neighbors is joining us from San Diego. It'll be a pleasure to get back to you next year. So looking forward to seeing you, Aaron. Right. The meat and potatoes of today's show certainly is a special guest, which is somebody who I have been a fan of for a while. He is somebody who has put plenty of great content out into the world, especially on the YouTubes for Sci-Fi Wire. And it's a pleasure to introduce Mr. MIKE AVILA. Hello there, sir. How are you?
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure to talk to you. I mean, I think I've talked up a lot of your interviews and the YouTube stuff that you've posted, certainly for Sci-Fi, for a while. And on my hard drive is a self-edited version of the Image Comics 3-parter as well, which
okay.
is a nice little hour block, which I return to every once in a while. So no, I'm a big fan of your work. Just to
Thank you for saying that.
No worries. Just to introduce yourself, yeah, let people know who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'm a senior producer and host for Sci-Fi Wire. I do a weekly column called Behind the Panel. I also do Behind the Panel videos and Behind the Panel audio documentary podcast for Sci-Fi Wire. It's kind of like my thing, covering the world of comics. I also cover film and television. I write books on the side when I have some spare time. I wrote the Art of and Making of Aquaman book, the official tie-in book to the film. I have my next book coming out next month, which is the official companion book to The Man in the High Castle. Man in the High Castle, Creating the Alt World, out in...
Oh, we have a frozen mic, which is a shame. I don't know if it's frozen at your end, everyone else's end as well. Let me know. It might just be me. I hope not. Please comment and let me know if it's Mike that's frozen. Although I'm getting moving. We've lost him. Oh no! I think we may have to just message him and let him know that there's a freeze at his end. That's such a shame. We were getting into that.
We back? Do we back?
Oh, we're back. We're back.
South Florida winds are causing the problem. We're having some storm situations here in Miami. So
it's okay. We've got you back again.
okay.
Okay. So yeah, you were talking about Sci-Fi Wire. You were talking about the Aquaman book. I think it was about there. We just kind of lost you.
Yeah, I wrote that book to tie into the film, and then from there I picked up some other book projects. I did a smaller Batman trivia book that came out last month. That's a fun trivia deck game. I've got another big book coming out in early December. It's been pushed back a little bit. The companion book to Man in the High Castle, the Amazon Prime series. That book will come out in early December, giving you guys plenty of time to binge on the 4th and final season, then come read the book and get all the behind-the-scenes details. That was a lot of fun to work on because the cast of that show and the producers really, really loved working on it. So it made talking with them a lot of fun. Those books are really torture if the people working on them don't enjoy the project. Thankfully, these last couple of books that I've worked on, the Aquaman and the Man in the High Castle, all the people involved were really proud of their work. And so it made my job much easier.
Well, I mean, it's something that because I've got a couple of friends that have moved into book writing as part of their fandom, and they start out with a really great idea, and then it's just a case of knuckling down and just working through them. So certainly, from watching from the periphery of somebody putting together a book project, I can appreciate it. It's incredibly hard work. So it's very rewarding to get that out into the world and into the hands of
it is
fans.
You said it perfectly, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, did you start as a writer, or was it more the video stuff? Or I mean, what was the kind of thing that you got into as your first part of your professional fandom, as it were?
I've always been a writer. I mean, I was writing for the student newspapers in high school and then in college, covering a lot of sports actually. I was and am a big sports fan, so I was doing that. And I went to college at Florida State University to eventually get into sportscasting. But it was right around the time that all that was changing, and so I ended up in TV news. So I went to TV news, which involves writing, but a very different type of writing, much shorter, more compact scripts, not as much creativity as you would have in terms of a script for, say, a video on Image Comics or a column and whatnot. So I spent 15, almost 20 years in television news and doing a movie show and whatnot. So when I was doing a movie show for NBC called Real Talk back in the early aughts, I really missed writing creatively. And it was right before that show debuted, a few years before the Marvel Cinematic Universe took off. And I started writing on the side for outlets like Newsarama, offering different feature takes. Like I remember doing a feature on why the Batman TV show of the 60s wasn't on DVD and things like that. And I did a bunch of that. I did some film reviews under a nom de plume that I will not reveal here, just to get my feet back in the waters there. And I found I really missed it. And then in the be careful what you wish for category, my movie show got canceled and the TV news industry imploded. So I ended up having to find work, and I went into full-time online writing for about a year and a half. And I did that for too many outlets to name. But I found I really enjoyed it. And I did a lot of work for Sci-Fi. I started a production company and I pitched some ideas to them. And luckily they liked them. I did this one series that was tied into a show that they had on the air called Hollywood Treasure, which is run by the gentleman who does Profiles in History, the online auction site. And so that turned into what began as a one-off relationship with Sci-Fi that has gone on just about a decade now, where I do a lot of different video projects for them and whatnot. And the turning point was when I was able to convince them that there was a big online fan base for comics, even though the sales numbers don't support the fan base out there. If you look at YouTube videos on comics projects, they outnumber the sales on many of the current comics. It's just this weird thing now. And we took a few chances on things and some interviews with guys like Frank Miller and Jim Lee, some big names, right? And that showed that there's an audience out there. And then myself and John Irwin, who's a video director at Sci-Fi, we were big Image fans, especially John, who's younger than me and was really influenced by the whole Image explosion in the early 90s. We pitched this idea to do something on the whole Image Comics revolution tied around the anniversary of it. And Sci-Fi kind of went for it, and we put it together. And that was really the turning point where they realized, wow, there is a really big audience that will watch well-produced, hopefully well-done videos on comics. And we've been proven right by that. And that's what's led to all the other things that I do. And I'm really quite grateful and fortunate that they saw that, because while it's work, I don't want to let people think that, oh, it's all fun and games, because it is work. It's fun work, and it's really nice when you enjoy your work.
I mean, it's something that you touched on there, the whole idea of kind of like the ancillary fandom of comics is actually more popular, or certainly the numbers kind of don't rise to watch. Actually, is actually selling in the comic book stores, and then you've got all the conversation about the films not feeding back to sales of the comics, and then it gets into a strange dynamic about how fandom works in comics. I mean, as a comics fan, I mean, how have you seen the dynamic between the fans and the actual comics industry itself?
You know, I see it on a lot of different levels. You make a great point there. The popularity of Marvel movies and even the DC movies, because as much grief as some of them get, even like garbage like Suicide Squad sold a gazillion tickets, right? Did great. Did it sell any new Suicide Squad comics? I bet you it didn't, because I don't even think the Marvel movies have done it. And that's a big problem. I've always said, I go on an online rant about this every once in a while, that it kills me. That's my French bulldog princess
Yes,
over there
it's
making
okay.
noises.
I've had the wife walk in, so
It's okay. I like the background. I like the background cameos. But like I've always said that it's amazing to me that Marvel has not figured out, and maybe Disney, this is more Disney's fault. They haven't figured out a way to capitalize on these movies to sell more graphic novels, because it's amazing that something like a video that I'll do with John Byrne will have 75,000 views with no paid placement. We don't put paid placement behind that stuff. That's legit, authentic, organic viewership. And there are no comics that Marvel puts out outside of maybe one or two that come close to rivaling that in monthly sales, right? You look at a movie like Endgame, which sells almost $3 billion in ticket receipts. What has that done for comic sales? It's so frustrating, because it should be helping to grow the industry. The one positive I will say, I get this a lot as in my circle of friends, I'm the nerd there. So when my friends take their kids to see all the MCU movies, because they all go see them, I'm the guy who gets the phone calls right after the film. Hey, I got you on speaker with my kids. They got to ask you questions. Where does Thanos come from? You know, what was his first story? All this stuff. Is this how his comic book origins are? So I have a spinner rack in my guest room that I keep stocked with graphic novels and comics that are almost separated by age, so that when my friends come with their kids, I go, look, you like the Infinity Gauntlet? You like the Infinity War? Here's the Infinity Gauntlet trade paperback. Bring that back, because I got to lend it to somebody else. But I go, read that. It's very different, but that reads well. And also, it's also relatively age appropriate for most kids under 16. So I try to do that as well. Like when my friends see a Batman movie, I try to recommend them the right Batman stories. I don't just drop them into the Dark Knight Returns. I try to make them earn that, but I'll give them year one. I'll give them year one, because you read year one, and Jim Lee has said this every time I've asked him this question. I go, what's the Batman story you recommend the most to people? Don't recommend Dark Knight Returns. Do what Jim says. Start with year one. It's the perfect entry point.
it's the strongest of the two books for me.
I don't disagree with you. In a lot of ways, it's a better story in terms of really understanding the character better. I think Dark Knight Returns is a masterpiece, especially if you have some history with the character, right? It gives you better payoff.
Strangely enough, when it comes to recommending Batman, I go Secret of the Waiting Graves, but maybe that's just me showing my age. I don't know.
There's no such thing as a bad Batman story, so that's also a good recommendation. But I'm with you on that. I think the last great hurdle that DC and Marvel have to do is figure out a way to turn these movies that are selling so many tickets into comic sales. Maybe it's providing. I personally think that eventually the comics industry's got to go to trades and self-contained stories and do away with the monthly floppies. I know that's a huge transition, but I think the success of graphic novels, like from people like Raina Telgemeier and the Captain Underpants type stories, are showing that kids want to read them. They don't just want to spend $5 on a 22-page story, no matter how well it's written or drawn. It's just not enough story for the money. And why would they, when they can spend $12 and get a graphic novel that gives them 112, 120 pages? That's also really well done.
Sure.
I think that's where the industry is going to go.
I mean, I think we'll kind of dovetail into the conversation about conventions in that regard, because I was having this conversation at my comic book shop this week, because I went to get my pull list. I went to collect the books, which have been sat there for about a month now. So I was playing catch up, and we were talking about books like House of X and Powers of X. And I was saying to myself that when I was reading these books, the way I'm reading comics now is, if I don't feel that a 13 to a 16-year-old boy or girl can't get into these books, can't get into these comics, right, then where's the next readership coming from? Where's the next readership age? And that kind of dovetails into fandom audiences at conventions, because you look at the audiences that are going to shows. It's a lot of people with disposable income that have the ability to fly to San Diego or Los Angeles or wherever. And I'm very much of the love of those conventions which really do embrace the younger audiences and trying to get kids into comics. How have you seen conventions evolve over the years? Because we were talking just before we came on air about how you felt that the size really is a bit of a hindrance, certainly for the professionals that are trying to interact with their fans.
Size is absolutely affecting it. Look, and that's good in that you're seeing families there. Like I was just at New York Comic Con, where Sci-Fi Warrior was the media partner there, and it was great because it gave me a great vantage point, not just from like our studio Skybox doing the interviews with all these great creators, but I could literally see out into the floor, and I saw kids everywhere in cosplay. I saw them waiting to buy stuff and browsing things. It was great. New York Comic Con is a great kid-friendly show, as is San Diego. The advantage that New York Comic Con has is they can let more people in, as opposed to San Diego, which they've been capped for several years now because it's just so popular and the size of the convention center. But what I notice is they have all these kids there, and too many shows that I go to, not just in New York and San Diego, but elsewhere, they don't do enough to program for the younger kids, and they're programming too much for people like you and I, which is great. But honestly, you're not growing your business if you're ignoring it. And I don't just mean throwing up a little bounce house over there. I mean, generate specific ideas. I have kids my kids have been lucky to go with me to San Diego and New York. Those have been their first 2 conventions. So when they asked me to go to SuperCon, which I moderated at over the summer, I go, you can come by, but I had to tell them, I go, this is different. It's a different type of show because the other 2 shows are big media spectacles. Whereas Florida SuperCon, for example, is more of a traditional con. And I go, so do that. But they had a lot of Reed Pop, they just bought that show, and they put in some kid activities in a section of the convention center on Miami Beach. And I go, that's what these shows need to do more. They need to do things like that. So that way the parents who want to bring their kids in and kind of show them what they love, right? And they want to share the passion for the fandoms that they have, they got to be something there, because if you take your kid to a show and it doesn't do a good job of programming for the kids, your kid's never going to want to go back there because the crowds are going to intimidate them a little bit.
Who was it? There was a conversation I had this with the Jeff Chital, who's the organizer of the NICE convention here in the UK, said pretty much the same thing, especially if the dad's really into his comics. He drags little Johnny along, at which point little Johnny's going to go, well, no, I'm going to rebel against this because I'm getting dragged here. If it's not if it's not appealing to them, I mean, it speaks volumes that the Nickelodeon stand is one of the traditionally busiest stands of the whole weekend, because it
Lego. Look at Lego. If I was a convention programmer, I would do anything possible to have Lego at all of my shows, because the Lego building station was jam-packed at San Diego nonstop. My kids didn't want to leave there, and it was great because it saved me money, because otherwise they'd want to just buy stuff. And they could sit there and build, and they set this up, and it was fantastic. Bandai had another building station at New York Comic Con. They had like 7 different booths there with all these little model kits, which are very popular now. And they had a building station there, and it was packed all 4 days. And it was great because it wasn't just grown-ups, it was grown-ups with kids. I'm assuming, they're family members, their sons and daughters, and it was great. And I go, you need to have interactive things there, because it can't just be about bring your kids and bring your money and just buy stuff. I want my kids to experience things. And do I wish they collected comics? Sure. I'm kind of glad they don't, because it's super expensive. you know what I mean? But if they want to buy a graphic novel from Paper Cuts or whatnot, something kid-friendly, or if Marvel and DC have their kid-friendly young adults books out there, awesome, great. But I'd love for them to experience, finding 1 or 2 collectibles. Like my oldest daughter has the nerd gene like me, so she likes stuff that she can display. But my younger one likes to buy things that she can play with. So I go, you want to buy that action figure? Fine, because I know she's going to play with it. And it's fun. But I think all cons need to have things for kids to do, not just look at and buy.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Certainly, then, with the our generation, then that do and have grown up on comics, and certainly when we're going to Artist Alley and seeing some Artist Alleys work and some of them don't, but certainly still seeing the comics being represented at these big shows, which are turning into media shows and shows across the board. But it's great to see those shows that do represent comics in a strong way. New York Comic Con certainly has that huge, epic Artist Alley. I mean, is there anyone that you try and catch up with on a regular basis? I mean, I can imagine when you're working at con, it gets especially difficult.
Yeah, and I hate saying this because people are gonna be like, oh, he's whining about working at Comic Con. So I'm not whining, but in San Diego, I haven't seen a panel since the Avengers assembled in Hall H. That's how long ago it's been since I've been able to go sit in a panel on my own, right? And even then, I was live. I think I was live tweeting that for Newsarama that year. The only other panels that I've done the last like 5 or 6 years have been panels that I've been moderating, which is awesome and it's great. But I miss being able to go and sit in a great panel, with guys like Paul Levitz and Marv Wolfman, waxing poetic about the glory days of the '70s at DC. I see those all the time on the San Diego programs, and I'm like, I want to do that panel. No chance because I got to interview somebody. So it's a double-edged sword. I will say this. I haven't been able to enjoy the San Diego Comic-Con Artist Alley in years, and I'm an original art collector. That's literally what I want to go to a show to do, and I haven't been able to do that. This year, I built in some time to go find at New York Comic-Con some people to interview for some upcoming videos that we're doing, and I figured I could do that, and I said I built in some time, and it was a cheat to allow me to actually go to Artist Alley and to see who was there. I had no idea who was going to be there, but I know some of the video ideas we have for 2020. And so I'm just going to go walk down there and I'm going to see some names and see if they tie in. And I got lucky. And one of the guys that I connected with was one of my favorites from the 80s, Bob Hall, who was an artist on West Coast Avengers and a bunch of other books. And I was a big, big West Coast Avengers fan because Wonder Man is one of my all-time favorites. And I saw him there and I was happy about two things. One, he looked great. And he had people at his booths, which means he's making money, which means it's worthwhile for him to go there, which I was very happy to see. And I did an interview with him, which will be part of a couple of videos that we're going to do in 2020. And he was awesome. He had these great stories, and I got a commission from him. My only art purchase of the con was he did this great full-figured Wonder Man pencil and ink, and it was amazing. It was fantastic in the safari jacket from the glory days of the 80s. It was amazing. But you go down that corridor that they have there, and there's so many great artists, modern artists. Tula Lote, who, shameless plug, is coming up on an upcoming podcast episode of Behind the Panel. She's a really popular artist who's also doing.
She's from around my neck of the woods,
and she runs a very popular show convention in England as well. So she's a fascinating, multifaceted artist, and she was there. But then right around the corner, you had guys like Bob Hall, and you had Arthur Adams a few spots down. So it was a great mix of classic and contemporary artists, which I think is what makes a good artist alley. Because honestly, do I like talking with the newer artists? Sure, especially for work. But in terms of my art collecting, I like the older guys. Original art collecting is built on nostalgia. Sure. I can't draw stick figures. I like what I like because I remembered reading it as a kid. So I'm always going to gravitate towards those guys who are drawing books that I read as a kid. So I like that mix. And I think New York Comic Con does that as well as most shows. Although I've heard the show going on this weekend in Baltimore is really good for that as well.
I've heard good things about that show as well. You're absolutely right. I mean, very quickly to go back to the Paul Levitz, my first panel ever hosting was with Paul Levitz on the panel.
Easiest job ever.
It was amazing because the whole thing was about the English invasion. It was the British invasion of comics, at which point I went into a nice long introduction, asked my first question. So what was the tone of comics in the American market prior to the English artists coming in? At which point he turned around and said, well, if you're going to talk about the British invasion, you really need to go back 7 years. At which point I did, okay, just step back and just let him go, because it was just so much fun. When it came to hosting panels, how did you get into that? Was it something that you were actively pushing to do, or was it something that was kind of introduced to you?
I kind of pursued it. I didn't really know how to do that. It's kind of like the same thing with book writing. I kind of fell into it. The books through two friends of mine, Tara Bennett and Paul Terry, who have written dozens of these. Tara just wrote the latest Making of Outlander book, and just did a signing with the creator of the Outlander books in Phoenix with 1,000 crazed fans this past weekend. But she helped get me my first book deal because she knew all the right people. And then I asked a lot of my publicist friends in the comics world, hey, I'm going to be in San Diego as usual. If you need somebody to moderate a panel, or in New York, keep me in mind. I'm happy to do it. And it was great because Fletcher Chufeng at DC, who coordinates a lot of their events, cons and signings and things like that. We've become buddies over the years, and he asked me, "Hey, what are you doing Saturday in San Diego one year? You want to moderate this panel?" And I said, "Sure, I'll make it. I'll carve out a window." And Sci-Fi is nice about letting me carve out that hole in my schedule because it's a nice way to build, I guess, their brand name, to show that their people are there involved in it. And that's just how I do it. And then, like you do, I'm sure you spend a couple days thinking of smart questions so you don't sound stupid on there. The most important thing, and I wonder if you agree with me on this, the most important thing for me when I'm doing those panels is to be like an avatar for the audience, to ask the questions that you hope that they want to ask, and then stay the hell out of the way. I've done a panel with Paul Levitz and Marv Wolfman and Nicola Scott. I don't need to say much outside of introducing them, set up a question, and shut up, because nobody in that audience is there to hear me talk. Paul Levitz is living, breathing comics history. Marv Wolfman has created more characters than we can remember, right? And Nicola Scott is one of the great artists of the current era. So I don't need to say much. I don't need to say much there.
Well, it's safe to say that no one is ever going to be in the room to see me on a panel stage. They're there to see the guests. That's what they're there to see. I mean, you're right. It really is a case of because if anything, I mean, you say to be an avatar, but I also think to kind of be an intermediary between the panel guests and the audience, to kind of ask the question that perhaps the audience didn't think of, and to kind of, I mean, the old phrase that they don't know what they want until you give it to them. So I do try and think of those questions that perhaps they haven't thought of. At the end of the day, if it's something that they are going to ask, which is pretty obvious, it's something you can Google. I want to try and get a little bit more under the skin. But at the end of the day, you're right. It's all about the guests and letting them dictate where the conversation is going to go. And yeah, you're right. It's just, in some regards, getting out of the way.
To me, a good panel is summarized by this: if they walk away, if the audience walks away learning one thing that they didn't know before they walked in that room, then I succeed. So it's really just about putting the guest in a position to succeed, to give that information out there. And I've been fortunate to do a lot of comics panel with folks like that. I mean, I got to do a panel with Frank Miller and the whole Dark Knight, the Master Race creative team. Easiest thing ever. It was like all I could do was work hard to not sit there and fanboy out over it. I don't need to do much.
Yes, that would be the. As maybe people who watch this know, I work as a DJ, so working in front of an audience is something that I'm comfortable with and that I can do. Frank Miller is the only time when I've actually lost the plot. I was doing a Q&A. He was stood 5 foot away from me. We were in a room which only had 30, 40 people. It was a VIP session.
Where was this?
It was just insane because I just looked him in the eye, and my brain just jumped about 5 foot to the right, and I was just left there. So like, I just lost it. Just at which point, you get back in there. You get back in there. I'm just pulled it back, just about pulled it together. But no, I totally get what you're saying about that. In terms of favorite memories then at conventions, because you've seen the landscape grow and change and evolve, and obviously you've seen how the landscape of conventions has changed. It's certainly become more corporate. It's become more monetized. You've seen likes of ReedPop take a place in that landscape. But in terms of memories for yourself and prized memories, do you have any that you'd like to share?
Too many to I eat up all your time here, but I'll give you a few quick ones. I've been going to shows since like 1981, 82. Growing up in Miami, we'd have one show a year here at the old Howard Johnson's in North Miami Beach. And I would look forward to it like Christmas. And they'd get some really great guests there because, you set up a show at the right time of year. It's very easy to convince people to come to Miami and sign a few comics, especially back then when it was much more relaxed. There was one show in the early 80s where Walt Simonson, during his Thor days, was here with John Byrne during his FF days. And I've told this story to both John and Walt. because as you know, as I mentioned earlier, I collect art, and I go, so here I am at the show, and I'm 13, I don't know any better, and I'm pushing aside this stack of ugly black and white cardboard paper that's in front of John Byrne, and I want to put my comic books in front of him to sign my X-Men and FF books, and I'm just shoving aside this stack of worthless black and white junk, and it's all these pages from, you know, his X-Men run that are now worth tens of thousands of dollars that I would pretty much amputate my right arm for a page, and I did that aside. So then I get those books signed, and I go over, and Walt is over there doing free head sketches for kids because he's, you know, the nicest guy ever. So I get a Thor book signed by him, and then he goes, "Would you like a sketch?" Like, he asked me, I still remember this. He goes, "Would you like a sketch?" "I'd love one. Who do you want?" Instead of saying Beta Ray Bill or Thor, I asked him for a Wolverine. Three tables down from the guy who should have been drawing Wolverine for me, I asked Simonson to draw me a Wolverine. And I was like, literally, that was the first ever original art sketch I ever got from a creator. Fast forward a few years later, at that same Howard Johnson's, I meet, at the height of the Marvel speculator boom, I meet Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane for the first time, signing their number ones, you know, X-Men and Spider-Man. Huge show, thousands of people there. It was absolute insanity. And I remember I've told Jim and Todd this. I go, you know, I remember sitting there waiting in line to meet you guys. So the fact that I actually get to talk with you guys, and I'm buddies with Jim now, and Todd actually knows my name, which to me always blows my mind, that my favorite artist from the 90s, you know, from that last big era for me as a comics fan, like, actually knows who I am when he sees me. It's still crazy. And I go, "Do you remember anything about those shows?" And he goes, "Dude, you're describing one of 100 different shows that I did that year. They were all like that," which tells you how big those gentlemen were back in those days. And here's a favorite one that I have from a little bit later on. It's 1997, 1998. I'm working in Atlanta as a reporter, and I convinced the TV station that I was working at to let me go cover Dragon Con in downtown Atlanta, which is pound for pound the best show for cosplay anywhere you'll go, FYI. So I go there and I interview Anthony Daniels, the late Richard Hatch from Battlestar Galactica, who told me about his plans then to reboot Battlestar Galactica as a grittier, you know, version of the show. You know, this is years before the sci-fi reboot. And so I'm getting in an elevator, and I've got a bunch of books, including this massive coffee table book, 40 Fabulous Decades of Marvel. And somebody tells me to hold the elevator door, and I'm in. I'm the only person in the elevator. And who is it but Stan Lee?
Nice.
Stan Lee walks in, and I recognize him because I've met him a few years before for the first time. But of course, I know what he looks like. He walks in alone with nobody else around him, sits there with me, and I start talking with him. And I'm engaging in a conversation as we're going up 2 flights. And we step out, and I'm walking with him. And I go, "Oh, my God, wait, Stan, can you sign this book for me?" And I whip out the book, and he goes, "Oh, sure." And he stops, and he signs the book for me there. And we keep on talking. And it was like such an amazing memory, because years later, I would interview him a bunch of other times because I've been very fortunate. But then I would see him at conventions. And as you know, if you've been to San Diego, the last few years that he would appear there, he was the biggest star there. He'd have a phalanx of security guards taking him everywhere. And every time I would see that, I would stop and I would think, I go, how lucky I was that I was able to see him at a show before the convention business blew up, and I could sit there and have a conversation. Because I think if you talk to guys like Walt and John, and I bet you this is one of the reasons why John Byrne doesn't do many shows anymore. It's not fun for him. Those shows used to be where they could catch up with their pals and socialize and have a nice, relaxing time. They can't do that anymore. John just showed up at New York Comic Con, and his lines were wrapped around the convention center floor for each appearance that he did, because he's still incredibly popular. By the way, I bought his artist edition, his artifact edition book from IDW there. I couldn't even get it signed because I couldn't wait in the line long enough, because it was 2 hours long and I had to get back to go do work. So I couldn't get my book signed.
Yeah, it's one of those hardships, isn't it? You just kind of, it is.
But the shows, bigger is not always better. With regards to the intimacy of the shows, I mean, Walt Simonson, when I was talking with him at the IDW booth, Maggie Thompson, the first lady of comics fandom, was trying to tell him this great story involving, I believe, Mark Hamill, and it took her 15 minutes to deliver the punchline of the story because so many people were waiting to get books signed and Walt didn't want to keep them waiting. And I'm like, back in the old days, you know, she could have sat there and had a nice, relaxing conversation with Walt about that. And it was different.
Yeah.
It's just different now.
Well, I mean, you keep seeing the Twitter feeds and social media feeds of artists and writers, especially when a show is done and dusted, and everyone's on the flights back home and saying, "I didn't get the chance to see you. I didn't get the chance to see you," and it's just reams of people that are just unable to catch up. But you do hear about the golden days, or even not that far away, when maybe even a decade ago, when people used to find themselves in the bars and the hostelries. After the show floors closed to actually meet up and catch up with people. Very quickly, we'll do a couple of comments that have come up on the feeds. Certainly talking about the way of possibly feeding fandoms back to comics, and especially with the other media that's out there. And Andrew Dickinson saying possibly adding a digital copy of the story to the DVD Blu-ray digital download, which is a pretty
great idea.
It's a great idea, and also putting a QR link on the tickets to the movies.
That's an even better one.
That's a good one.
Imagine if you buy an Infinity War ticket, opening weekend, you get a free copy of the Infinity Gauntlet graphic novel. That's a win-win.
Yeah, I mean, my idea was pop-up comic book shops in the foyers of the cinema. That was my particular one. But
how is that not happening by now? How are there not stacks of trades printed, you know, sold for $14.99 and under? Because, you know, DC Vertigo had a great success with that in the height of the Vertigo days. 100 Bullets. Brian Azzarello has told me that the reason that book took off was because they reprinted the first few issues for like $9.99, and it helped get people hooked on the book, and then they bought it monthly. But the trades were where that book really made their money and built up its popularity. You print up a $12.99 version of Infinity Gauntlet so that you can show off the great artwork from that series. You'll sell a gazillion copies. Death of Superman should have been sold in Batman v Superman. Come on.
Yeah.
You're just leaving money on the table there. Come on, leaving money on the table.
It makes sense. Certainly when it comes to the way that I've been seeing the comics element of conventions and on the exhibition floor, this was definitely highlighted at New York Comic Con, and also I think the LA Comic Con as well. They were people who went there were talking about how the big two were having their stands. That's fine, but they were definitely more dwarfed by what would be considered the independents now. So IDW, Dark Horse, Image, they were the bigger and more popular booths. Do you think we can see a continuing shift towards or away from the big two in terms of the way that comics are being appreciated now?
I think so, and I think Image is a great example of it. I mean, it's hard to just think of them as a small player because they have some of the best and biggest books out there. I think Saga is hugely important to them, and they have such a wide variety. The great thing about Image is they have books for all kinds. If you like superheroes, they've got some superhero books, but if you're not a superhero comics fan, and there's a lot of non-superhero comics fans out there who like to read comics and graphic novels, then why wouldn't you read an Image book? They've got everything from hard science fiction to great horror books to character dramas. They've got a great variety of books under the Image umbrella because, you know, as Todd always points out, they've got the best creator deal. And now that Vertigo's gone, there's no reason for anybody who has a creator-owned book to not go to Image. So there's no reason for them to go anywhere.
Yeah, I did a panel with Eric Stevenson and Kieran Gillen, and Declan Shelby was on there as well, and we were talking about
That's a good panel.
It was a great panel, and to have that conversation about the ages of Image, because you talk about the classic Image age of the Rob Liefelds and the Jim Lees, the starts of where Image progressed from, but then moving through the age of Saga. You could even say the age of the Wicked Divine as the next step, and then we kind of talked about where Image could possibly go from there. And he was talking very much in the terms of fantasy as the next possible step, moving and possibly leapfrogging from Game of Thrones and that kind of storytelling. And I found that fascinating that there is still that sense of looking for the next big chapter in a company's history. But you're also seeing that with various other publishers as well. Boom are doing some great work in terms of fantasy. And I'm thinking that perhaps fantasy is the next age of comics. And you're kind of seeing that feeding into...
Fantasy's one. I think horror is another one. I think Hill House Comics from DC, the Joe Hill imprint, I think that's going to do well because horror really is having another moment now because there's so many people who are interested in writing good creative horror. I think Young Animal, the pop-up that DC does, is also good because it's so out there and so wacky, and I think it appeals to a much younger audience. I actually think autobiographical style books aimed at a younger crowd are ultimately the future of comics, and I think DC's already jumping on this with a lot of the young adult books. You're seeing it with like Cami Garcia's Raven book, and you're seeing their younger skewing graphic novel takes on their characters coming out. I think Marvel needs to really jump on that as well because I think that's the key. I've noticed it with my daughter. That's what's gotten her into it, the Raina Telgemeier books. I think the next wave of comics readership has to be hooked by giving them something to read that they identify with. I think the superhero saturation is real at the readership level. And there's such a resistance to getting into it because 50, 60 years of history, no matter how many times a CB Cebulski will get out there and say, no, it doesn't matter if you've never read a comic book before, you can pick up House of X and you'll understand what's going on. One, I love House of X and Powers of X, and it's nonsense. It's nonsense. Like, I'm an X-Men aficionado, right? I'm not an X-Men expert, but I've been reading it for 40 years, and I had to stop and reread it a couple times. And I got my money's worth out of those books because Hickman is writing some great stories there. But it's not a super accessible book for somebody walking off the street. It's just not. And if you tell your audience that, you're not telling them the truth. It's not. And you need to offer that because automatically, people don't want to feel like they're missing out on something when they buy the book. And I think if you want to get that young audience in there, you've got to do that. And I think if you do that, maybe it's through fantasy. And I think that's a very accessible way to do it because if you look at the cartoon series out there that kids glom onto, it has a lot of fantasy elements to it. And that plays well. I think fantasy, I think horror, I think science fiction comics, like you've seen with Saga, I think that's a great book. I mean, obviously that jumps across several genres, but it's a big sci-fi book. And it had a relationship angle to it that I think has really fascinated and hooked an audience. And I think they need to do more things like that. The problem is Marvel and DC are invested in the characters that they own. If Kieran Gillen's got a great idea for a character, he's not going to take it to Marvel. He's certainly not going to take it to DC. He's going to go to Image. Why wouldn't you?
Or Boom with
or Boom. Exactly. So if Kieran's one of those guys who has 18 different ideas and he can spread them around. But like, Scott Snyder, he used to be able to take it to Vertigo, but he's got no place to take it now. So he can get his creator-owned fix at Image and then, still write his great Justice League and Batman stories or whatever other characters he wants to tackle. And I think that's what you're going to see moving forward. I think you're going to start seeing exclusive contracts start to disappear outside of a few big exceptions because, they can give Brian Bendis $1 gazillion because he can do a lot of things and he can command a certain freedom to do his Jinx World books as well. But outside of that, if you're a creator with a lot of different ideas outside of superheroes, why would you do a creator exclusive deal with Marvel?
Which explains, I suppose, the likes of Donny Cates being able to spread his seed, as it were, amongst numerous publishers, which is, there's certainly where you can see. In terms of the actual fandom then and conventions, because certainly this year, I think we have been talking over the last 10, 15 years about the fandom bubble and the convention bubble bursting. But I don't think that's what we're ever going to see. If anything, we're just going to see this slight deflation, this kind of the air coming out of the balloon. Has it been this year that that's happened? Because there's definitely been a feeling that there's some of the energy that's missing. There's something that's not
Yeah.
quite connected.
Yeah, I think where you're seeing the bubble burst, when there's too many shows. So I think you're going to start running into a case where there's too many shows in the same areas. And how many times can you go and get a sketch from the same artist who appears at some of these? I think you need to, promoters need to really be smart about how they do it and how they program certain shows. You know, you're getting to a stage now where, I was thinking about this with a friend of mine. What states in the United States of America don't have a decent sized con at this point? It's very few. And so you need to figure that out, because you need to have a break. You need to give people a chance to recharge their batteries financially, to be able to maintain a convention going schedule, unless you want to only rely on the local traffic, right? So if you want me to go to Baltimore Con and Minneapolis Con, you got to give me a chance to save up some more money to go to those, because nobody's wealthy enough to go to all these shows, especially if you're doing the whole meet and greet with actors. That's where I think you're going to see the convention bubble burst, is how many of these appearances can people pay, you know, year after year. Some of the, you know, it's great to see Chris Hemsworth and Jeremy Renner and Chris Evans at these shows, and I'd love to be able to go and meet them, but you know, I'm personally never going to pay that money to meet anybody. I'm just never going to do it. God bless people who do it, and I see these actors really going out of their way to make it a fun experience. Like I just saw Brie Larson with that great moment with the gay couple that got engaged, photo up, and that's awesome. And I see guys like Stephen Amell who have really, I think Stephen Amell really helped perfect the way you do this as a business from the celebrity side. And you know what? I know people who meet him, and I know people who go in to shows to meet Stephen, and they say it's great. He talks to them. It's not just take a picture and get the hell out. Like he talks with you, and he goes, he's putting effort into it, and that's great. But there's only so much money you can afford to pay to meet, you know, your favorite TV stars or movie stars. So at a certain point, there's got to be some give there, because Chris Evans is only going to do it if you pay him a certain amount of money. Chris Evans doesn't need the money. I'm sure Chris Hemsworth doesn't. So unless you make it worth his while, why is he going to do that? Because he frankly doesn't need to do it. And I don't fault him for that. We live in a free economy. If Ace or Wizard World want to pay him $1 gazillion to go and sign a ton of autographs and take pictures, more power to you. You know, if somebody wanted to pay me money to do it, which nobody does, I would happily take it. And I would, you know, put my best face forward and go and do it. But at a certain point, I think you're going to see that contract a little bit, because there's only so much money out there for people. Like I know San Antonio had Arnold Schwarzenegger, was it last year? And it was a fortune to meet him. And I love Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I remember thinking, I go, there's no chance in hell I would pay that. And how many people could pay that? It was like almost $1,000 or something. How many people can afford to pay all the other itinerant costs that go along with a convention and then cough up $1,000 to meet Arnold? It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
I mean, the two, you're absolutely right. I mean, the two people I would love to get on the show to talk to is Stephen Amell, for one. If anything, because, I mean, people talk about the whole Steven Spielberg perfecting the summer blockbuster, and it was George Lucas that perfected taking the money. If anything, Stephen Amell is that kind of equivalent when it comes to the convention landscape. And also Aaron Gray.
Love Aaron Gray.
Absolutely. And as somebody who was one of the first people to make that transition from somebody who people would go and see to being a manager of those people, she was one of the first to really make that that leap. I'd love to get those two on. And certainly when you're talking about, like you say, the shows that there's maybe too many, and it is growing it's spiraling a little bit too out of control. But I think also at this point, we're seeing a lot of shows that are either fine-tuning what they're doing and getting it right, or just there's a lot of shows that are just going to fall by the wayside because people are seeing too many bad experiences. And I think if anything's going to hurt fandom, it's going to be those bad experiences. I mean, we've got Andrew Dickinson saying how many bad cons have put people off. There was a Baltimore one this year, and those have been a couple this year. Leanne D That's the bad part of being this part of Texas, because the PopCon Celebrity Con is all that is that's close to me.
Right.
That's a very good point. And Michael P, our local con, is totally mercenary. Now, his local con, I believe, I don't think it is San Diego. I think it's Texas. So, yeah, I get the general idea. But no, I mean, I think I'm really curious to see where cons go, certainly 2020, 2021, with the evolution of the Disney Marvel product and how they're going to continue to fold that in, how fandom is going to evolve, and how the numbers are going to translate to how product continues to come to us.
I
And
am curious. I'll leave you with this thought though.
sure,
How does Disney? They may already be thinking about this. In a couple of years, maybe we're seeing a D23 type show that travels, that hits some of the major cities, and they take certain people, because Disney not only has the Marvel and Star Wars, but they've got another thing that would attract tens of thousands of people to a convention, which is like Disney Channel. And imagine if they would do a show with a lot of their younger skewing shows for the Disney Channel crowd, the Descendants and the Gabby Durant and all these little fans. You could really do something there, and they've got the infrastructure in place to really do an organized show. The thing is, to me, I think you're going to see cons evolve to be more experiential. You've got to offer more than just a meet and greet and a chance to buy stuff. Obviously, that stuff is going to be there.
that's what we've
You've
got
got
to
to do. It's the panel discussions with the actors, Q&As with them that lets you connect more. That's where I think these shows have really succeeded. They've kind of broken down that wall between the stars and them. Ever since The Walking Dead has become such a mainstay on the convention circuit, I think that's helped break that wall down so that you feel connected to your favorite actors, right? I think conventions need to do more to do that, and also to really provide an experience thing. San Diego does it because it's San Diego and it's a freak of nature. Where you go, oh, I did all the outdoor things, because you can go to San Diego Comic-Con and not step foot in the convention center and have a great time, right? You don't even need a ticket. More shows need to do that. Now, that involves marketing and promotions and partnering up with other people, but you need to do that because that's what's going to make your show last longer, and that's what's going to make people remember it. It's not like, oh, I went and I bought a $60 comic book. You can do that anywhere. You can do that on eBay. You got to give people a reason to remember your show, and it can't be just something that costs them $500.
Sure. That makes absolute sense. I'm looking forward to the next evolution of shows, and I think it's going to happen pretty damn soon, because
Right.
I think an audience can only take so much, and then again, we've been saying this for the last couple of years, but I think there's only so many times that the sand can get kicked into somebody's face, because it is feeling a little bit like arrogance on some organizers' parts. So I think it's time for possibly a bit of a shift. Absolutely. In terms of the conventions that you're going to, do you have anything that's kind of like in the calendar already for maybe the beginning of the year or closure of this one?
I think I'm done with cons.
You're pretty much done.
I'm done with cons for 2019. I will probably be, actually, I'll definitely be at WonderCon. I know Sci-Fi will be at San Diego and New York Comic Con next year, but I want to get to a couple of shows that I haven't been to next year. There's a show in South Carolina that I've heard is really good, and I might go to that one on my own. And it's funny, I'm 3.5 hours away from it, but I've never been to MegaCon. And that's Memorial Day weekend. That might be tough because I try to avoid the theme parks Memorial Day weekend, but I might head out to MegaCon this year in 2020 for the first time.
Well, we'd like to see you on this side of the pond as well. If anything, just so I could get you a pint. But I may have to wait till San Diego.
Give me the show. Which show should I go to overseas?
If you were going to come here, certainly as a comics fan, I think Thought Bubble would be the one you'd need to come to. It's around the closure of this time of the year next year. So, yeah, we'd love to see you on this side. Have a word with Lisa or Tula Lote about that, and she'd certainly point you in the right direction on that one.
Will do. Okay.
Excellent stuff. Listen, Mike, thank you so much indeed for coming on. I think we could carry on the conversation because there's certainly we've certainly touched broad strokes with the way the convention landscape is at the moment. We could really get into some nitty gritty, but I really appreciate you coming on and taking time to talk to us. Is there anything, certainly when it comes to Sci-Fi Wire, that you'd like to talk to us about? Is there anything that is coming down the pipe?
Well, let's see. We've got in a couple of weeks we're going to have an upcoming video feature on the Marvel and DC Treasury Edition comics of the '70s that we shot at New York Comic Con. That was a lot of fun. And then we also have a special two-parter on the Teen Titans, their 55th anniversary. That'll be a pretty deep dive into the Titans history. That's coming up in about a month or so. And then every Tuesday, my weekly column on sci-fi.com. And the next podcast will be. We just dropped Dan Jurgens. We got Tula Lote coming up. We got Greg Capullo. Those will be fun. So hopefully you and your viewers will check them out. And hopefully you enjoy it. And let me know if you do or you don't. I like to hear positive and negative feedback.
Well, if anything, if the internet is good for anything, it's positive and negative feedback. So there we go. Listen, Mike, thank you so much indeed for coming on. One more time, if people could, where can people find you online in terms of
Twitter and Instagram at Mike Avila. Very easy. On Facebook, Michael Avila, but I'm mostly active about geek stuff on Instagram and Twitter. So find me there.
Brilliant stuff. Mike, thank you so much indeed for coming on, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday, sir.
You too. Pleasure being here.
Take care. Thank you. Excellent stuff. So there you go. MIKE AVILA. Thank you. I'm fascinated by the perspective of people who've been going to the shows for a while, that have got a real sense of what the landscape is all about. Mike really knows his stuff, and no, I'm a big fan of what he does, and I'll be continuing following what he does at conventions. Whether I get the chance to go to one of his panels is a whole other ball game, because we always find ourselves pinballing about. But there we go. Right, so thank you very much indeed for Mike for taking part and joining us on the show in that regard. Right, time to get into some stuff, because I have let something a little bit slide, because I was going to get into the bits and pieces of giving away some stuff. So I think we'll do two now, and then we'll do one at the end. First things first, I think we'll start with this. This is for two people. We've got ourselves some Avengers Endgame prints. Okay, these were ones that were commissioned by Marvel to be presented to fans and to go and when they went to see Avengers at Odeon. If I put that down there, you can just see the Odeon logo down there. The artwork was done by the incredible Sheffield, Rotherham-based artist Matt Ferguson. I forgot his name there for a second. Matt is just an incredible artist. If you've seen his stuff, he is going to be he's the guy who's done the artwork for the internal art for the Marvel Cinematic box sets that have just come out. That would be his scroll right there, because these are signed. We are going to give these away, and I think the way we're going to do this is we'll do these by Twitter, okay? But you have to be watching now. Now, I know that we've got 14 people watching on YouTube. These will be the Twitter ones. Basically, what I need you to do is tweet, "I want that endgame," in hashtag. I want that endgame, okay? And what I will do is I will mail these out to the first people who actually tweet those. I will follow the Twitter, and I will make sure that I find the first people that tweet, "I want that endgame." Okay, and if you tweet that, don't have to even tag me. Just I'll search for "I want that endgame," and the first two people I will get those out to, and I'll get in contact with you, and we'll get that up and running. So there you go. That's that. So there we go. Fantastic posters by Matt Ferguson. "I want that endgame." That's the hashtag. First two people will be able to get those prints. The next thing I want to give away is this, which is a Frank Quitely drawings and sketches book. Now, this is just, I mean, you can tell it's not massive. It's about the size of my hand. It's a small, it's a small intimate book, but it's really packed with some incredible stuff, and it's work in progress stuff from the likes of Jupiter's Legacy, Jupiter's Circle. There's also some We 3 stuff in here as well. If I could just Pax Americana, see if I can find Nothing to Declare. There we go, We 3, including one of my favorite all-time comic panels. If you've ever seen it, you know what I'm on about. In fact, if I can just lose that for a second, you get the idea. We're talking incredible work in progress artwork by the amazing Scottish artist Frank Quitely. So the thing about this particular book is it's not only a great book by Mr. Frank Quitely. Oh, wrong page. It's signed by Frank Quitely. So we are talking an incredible artist. We're talking an incredible book. And this one, I think I'm going to give away to anyone who is watching on YouTube. Oh, sorry. Yeah, on YouTube. Okay. So this will be my YouTube giveaway. Okay. These, by the way, once again, this is all to give away to celebrate since 2013, An Englishman in San Diego, which went live this week. So it's An Englishman in San Diego birthday party, as it were, and I'm giving you the chance to win this. So there you go, Frank Quitely, drawings and sketches. If you are watching this on YouTube, we are looking for the first comment that uses the phrase, I want that Frank. Okay, I want that Frank. That is the first person to comment with that. I'll get in contact with you and I will give that away and I'll mail that out. And these are all worldwide, by the way. So if you're watching in the States, I want that Frank. Okay. Third prize, a speedboat. No, but close. But we'll get there. I want that Frank. Okay. So if you are the first one to type that phrase into YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, that's for you. Okay. So we've done one for Twitter. We've done one for YouTube. I think Into the Blue Mister might have actually twigged that one. So congratulations to you. But there you go. Instant win. Okay. Last but not least, this will be for. I was going to do it for Facebook, but the thing is, this is going out onto my public Facebook, so anyone could be watching this. And if you are, fantastic. Let me just jump in on the comments. I mean, Sarita P is watching on Facebook, and I think Sam Payne is watching as well. So listen, thank you very much indeed for taking part. I appreciate it. But I'm not too sure what to do about this one. I think this is going to have to go on to. This is going to have to be a Twitter one, I think, because I want as many people to. Let's just jump in and do this. This will not be a first come, first served. I think I'm going to let this one be a random draw. Okay, so anyone, excuse me, anyone can win this. Okay, but you do have to use the hashtag, and I will let this stay open for another hour. Okay, so I believe it's 9 o'clock. Sorry, 11 o'clock Pacific at the moment. Have I got that right? 11 o'clock Pacific at the moment. It's 7:05 here in the UK. 8 o'clock GMT. I will close this. Okay. The hashtag I'm looking for is I want that Jim Lee. Okay. I want that Jim Lee is the hashtag because in 2014, as you may know, Jim Lee did this incredible artwork for the 2014 souvenir book. It's an amazing Batman, and that is Jim Lee's signature. In other words, the prize is a signed Jim Lee 2014 souvenir book with Jim Lee artwork on the front. I want that Jim Lee. I will be looking on Twitter, so you can go to Englishman SDCC. If you are watching this on Facebook, you can kind of go over to Facebook, so to Twitter, and use the hashtag. Or if you have a friend who's got a Twitter account, you can get them to use it. Why is that all squiffled out? There you go. Very strange. But there we go. That is a Jim Lee signed 2014 souvenir book, and I will mail this out worldwide to the person who I randomly choose using the hashtag I want that Jim Lee. Okay, but that's rather pleasant. I like that. I got 2 or 3. and 2 of them for me. But this is for you guys. Okay? So it's a pretty pristine 2014 souvenir book, but signed by Jim Lee. There we go. I want that Jim Lee on Twitter. Please do jump in and let's see if we can celebrate in fine style with all of the stuff that's happening with me in Englishman in San Diego. So there we go. Right. In terms of some news, just some things and bits and pieces that I do want to cover. We did the rewrap of the pre-registration badge sale that took place last week. We've had a couple of things that have moved past that in terms of statistics and also successful use of the waiting room procedure. As far as we can tell, there were no major flaws on the technical end of the waiting room. Our contact at the Epic sale has told us that on their end they had no lag and no drop. There were 1 or 2 people that did have some browser issues, as typical, but it was at the local end. In terms of the actual server end, there was no issue at the actual badge sale procedure was smooth at their end, and they had no lag or drop, which is impressive. Which does, however, mean I feel that we are not going to be seeing any change or evolution to the badge sale because at the end of the day, if it works, why fix it? If it ain't broke. So I don't think we're going to be seeing any change to the badge sale procedure for the general sale. When we get a date for that, we'll let you know. But as far as we can tell, we may be looking within the next couple of weeks, because we may be looking prior to Christmas. We'll be looking at the way that they've been running it in the last couple of years, trying to get it out of the way prior to Christmas. So fingers crossed, you will be seeing some emails pretty soon from Comic Con International. You may have noticed that their social feed has been particularly active, and they are not doing anything to kind of ramp down. They are keeping a real steady flow on what they're posting. Certainly as they get closer to the SAM show that they're hosting up at the Balboa Park location. So fingers crossed, we'll see what happens. Michael P is putting his hat into the ring and saying November 9th. It's possible. I mean, it's not that far away, so fingers crossed we'll be seeing that. That's the second weekend in November, so we'll see how that goes. Still can't afford to go, says Andrew English. Oh, listen, let's work on the lottery win. Let's see if we can get you the lottery win, Andrew. So fingers crossed on that. On a little bit more of a UK news cycle, there's also the news that dropped yesterday regarding the panels and content that's going to be coming to MCM Comic Con in a couple of weeks' time. Well, a couple of weeks' time, in next weekend's time. This is the 27th. It's a show which will be taking over the Excel's Centre in London. And something that I have had some issue with, and I have been particularly critical on this show regarding the MCM show, is how late they've been in announcing guests, inviting, talking about content, and talking about who's actually coming to the show. As it happens, they did announce something which does tie into what MCM appear to be using as an evolution of their show. They are going to be bringing the new Apple Plus show C to the Excel next weekend on a panel that's going to be taking place on the Friday, and we are going to be seeing Alfie Woodward and Jason Momoa appearing on stage, along with the showrunner and head writer. This is part of something which I'm going to see more of at conventions, I think. I think the streaming services are going to be more of the content provider for conventions, if anything, because they are seeing an audience, they're seeing something they want to tap into, and they are looking at conventions as being that conduit to their fandom, which means I think you're going to be seeing, I mean, we've seen it at San Diego Comic Con in the likes of Amazon Prime, the slight change of the shift with Netflix. But I think you're going to be seeing the likes of Disney Plus and also Apple Plus providing more content. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if you didn't see an Apple Plus stand at San Diego Comic-Con next year. It's possible. And if Netflix can have a booth, and if Amazon can have a booth, the next streaming service, which is Apple TV, they're going to be the new studios. So expect to see them a little bit further down the line. Andrew Dickinson, does Apple streaming start in the UK at a decent time, i.e. a not 6-month delay? As far as I'm aware, the official line for Apple TV is it's launching at the beginning of November. So, I mean, I could fire up my Apple TV now and just check. But as far as I'm aware, the actual, I believe it's November 6th is when that's going to be launching. But I don't know if the date seems, no, that's a Wednesday. I think I might just have to fire up my Apple TV and just confirm when it's actually saying on the actual Apple TV data. But there we go. I'm looking forward to seeing what they bring. C is a big show, but I'm wondering if they're going to stick to just the genre content, or whether it's also going to be like Netflix, bringing other shows that they're producing. So who knows? That's something that's going to be coming down the line. Last but not least, let's very briefly talk about something that has been happening this weekend. Talkin Con is doing its world tour, its final stretch. In other words, they are going to be closing Talkin Con down and evolving it into the FanFest events put together by James Frazier and his company. The concern that I have is the issues that I'm seeing coming from various quarters when it comes to Talkin Con currently taking place in Atlanta this weekend. I'm going to be posting something hopefully on Bleeding Cool in the next couple of days, but I'm just hearing way too many stories in terms of security and also staffing issues. That they are not providing any kind of support, that there's very few bodies on the ground. Oh, hang on a second. Let me just check what I'm looking at there. So I'm curious to see where and what reaction we're going to be seeing from the likes of Walker Stalker from any kind of official standpoint, and whether they're going to let us know exactly what they are doing to solve the problems moving forward in terms of how the FanFest events are going to take place. Talkin Con will stay in Atlanta after the tour, says Karma Savage. Fair enough. Is that? I think that is that the only location that they're working on. I think that might be the case. But whether it's a case of Talkin Con can continue in the light of what we're hearing from various quarters in terms of money's not getting paid, hotel rooms being cancelled at the last minute, guests or invited guests being uninvited, or indeed having their management company uninvite them because they're feeling that there's no support they're providing, or they're getting stuff late. And it's just feeling that there's the train is coming off the track, and I'm going to have to pay very close attention to what they're getting up to. But one Twitter feed that I would certainly keep an eye on is Karma Savage's, or certainly the what Karma's doing for her coverage for Second Union. So please do follow Second Union for all of the updates coming out of Talkin Con, or indeed you can head to 28 Savage Days to keep an eye on what Savage is doing, because this is an ongoing thing. We're into day 3 now, and Sarita P, Talkin Con have teamed up with FanFest, or vice versa. They already have dates for 2020 in the US. It's actually an evolution of the same company. It's James Frazier is basically a second name. It's a second branch, which is what has gotten a couple of people's attention here in the UK, because they're feeling that the changing of the brand name and the closing down of one brand name is one way for James to avoid a potential tax bill of quite substantial value. But this is something that a brighter person than I is going to have to look into. I'm going to have to find out more about what James is doing. I've reached out to the Walker Stalker Convention organization. I've reached out to James, and I'm hoping that we're going to get some kind of reaction from them. I'm just going to very quickly check on a message that I have just received. So bear with me a second, because let's have a look at this. Right. Right. Okay. This is somebody responding to the issues that have been taking place. It's Froggy Photography that's been handling the photography at Walker Stalker Con, and apparently it's just not gone well. With machines breaking, with staff disappearing. Yeah, it's not going well. I'm going to keep an eye on this particular issue and this particular show as it goes on, and I'm hoping that when the dust settles, we'll get more answers about where the fundamental problems have occurred. And that's Walker Stalker Con for this year. Right, that's us for today. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Once again, thanks to MIKE AVILA for joining us. Do check him out at MIKE AVILA on Twitter. All of his stuff is also available on Sci-Fi Wire on YouTube. I would heartily recommend checking it out, because it really is a heck of a thing that he does, and he continues to put out some really great content. So thank you very much indeed for Mike for joining us. I think that might be it for us for today. Once again, so I want that end game. I think that should have been claimed by now on Twitter. I will check the hashtag, but yeah, that's the hashtag for that. I want that, Frank. That should be on here, and I think someone already. Yes, I think somebody claimed that. And then I want that Jim Lee on the Twitter on the hashtag. You've got 40 minutes. So if you're watching this back on Twitter or wherever, if you used the hashtag on Twitter, do jump on that, and we'll see what's happening with this. I just want to very quickly dive into my schedule, because I want to make sure who we've got lined up, because I do want to announce we've got some guests who are coming up over the next couple of weeks, and I'm really excited about having them on the show. So I think next week I've got a guest which one or two people may have heard of on online, and he's going to be talking about the relationship between a creator and the fandom. This is David Pepose, who has done some great books. He's run some great Kickstarters as well, and he's going to be talking to us about that. And also we're going to be joined by Mark Serby as well, who's going to be talking about MCM. I believe he's going to have been there over the course of the weekend. So looking forward to hearing from Mark how MCM has gone. That's next weekend. So we're going to be talking to David Pepose and then MCM. For 3rd of November, we're still looking for a guest, but I think we may have someone lined up. The 10th of November, we've got Fanbase Press. We've got Bryant and Barbara Dillon, who's going to be joining us. Looking forward to talking to them. And then on the 17th of November is someone who I'm very excited to talk to. This is Katrina Fox from Comic Sketch Art. The reason why I'm curious to talk to her is purely because of the monetization and the business planning of the Artist Alley. We have all seen how artists and creators are now seriously monetizing some of their appearances, and how they are clawing back some of that cash that is floating around at a convention. Katrina Fox is part of a company which manages that and manages guests and their appearances at conventions. They are very, very cool. Andrew Dickinson saying, is that from Thought Bubble on the 10th? Yes, it will be. So it is going to also be a Thought Bubble review as well. Myself, we got asked this earlier, am I going to Thought Bubble? Yes, I am going to Thought Bubble, and I'm also going with the missus. So we're going to be making a full weekend of it. Looking forward to that. One or two people jumping in. David Purpose, one of my faves, says Aaron Neighbours. So yeah, looking forward to that. It's going to be a really fun show. I think I've never spoken to him before, and I'm really curious to having a chat with him. And also, Andy English, I'll be at MCM next week as well. So yeah, we'll have definitely a bit of a review of how MCM have gone, considering they have been announcing their guests and pretty much nailing down who's going to be showing up at their show 5 to 6 weeks prior to the actual show happening. A month and a half. I don't know a show, and even the guests that were announced then weren't huge. They've only been announcing their guests and who's actually going to their shows up to about a month to the actual event itself, if that. Is this something, a change in the sea winds, that people are buying badges for a convention? Excuse me. That they're buying badges for a convention irrespective of the guest that's going, and just hoping that the brand is going to be strong enough to have a good lineup going. Who knows? That's going to be part of the conversation with Mark Serby next week. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you are lucky enough to win our goodies. But like I say, about 25 minutes, and certainly that Jim Lee book will be done and dusted. I want that Jim Lee if you want the signed Jim Lee 2014 souvenir book. Andrew Dickinson might be Brexit, possibly, but I think that's something else. There's something else going on. But there we go. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Do take care. Enjoy the rest of your week. And from us to you, we'll see you next Sunday. David Purpose and also Mark Serby talking MCM London Comic Con. From me to you, take care.